My name is Marison and I am 33 years old. The morning everything changed forever started like any other. Though now I understand the warning signs had been showing up for months. For weeks, I'd been feeling something strange in my legs, a mild tingling that appeared after standing too long, which gradually turned into weakness, to the point where my knees would give out without warning. I saw several doctors, went through tests and scans, but none of them could give me a clear answer. My husband, Ison, was convinced I was making it all up. Every time I mentioned the discomfort, he would roll his eyes and say, "There she goes again, Marison," insisting it was all in my head. I tried to let it go because we had been married for 7 years and I wanted to believe he simply didn't understand what was happening. But his indifference started hurting more than the symptoms themselves. Things got worse when his mother, Patricia, started getting involved. She had never truly accepted me. In front of others, she acted sweet and friendly, but alone, she always found something to criticize, saying things like, "Women these days turn every little ache into an illness," while Ison laughed along beside her and I stayed silent. On the day of Patricia's birthday, the whole family gathered at her huge house, fully decorated with tables full of food and more than 30 guests. I didn't feel like going. That same morning, I had woken up with a strange numbness in both legs, like they were asleep. And I mentioned it to Ison, who, while adjusting his tie, told me not to start with drama that day because it was his mother's birthday. During the party, I tried to act normal, smiling, greeting guests, helping in the kitchen, but around 6 in the evening, something inside me broke. I felt a sharp jolt in my back, followed by a cold sensation running down both legs, and I froze completely. I tried to walk and couldn't. My heart started racing and I tried moving my feet again, but nothing happened, as if my body had simply stopped listening to me. I braced myself against the wall to keep from falling, but no one noticed because everyone was busy singing around the cake. I took a deep breath and tried to take one more step, and that's when my legs gave out completely, sending me crashing onto the driveway pavement. The impact knocked the air out of me and I heard alarmed voices rushing toward me. Someone asked what had happened while I tried and failed to get up, moving my legs and getting no response at all. Panic took over and I said in a shaking voice that I couldn't feel my legs. Several people exchanged worried looks, and that's when Ison showed up, and instead of asking if I was okay, calling for help, or even kneeling down, he just stood there staring at me and shouted for me to stop faking and get up. Everything went silent for a moment. I thought I had misheard him, but he said it again, louder. I felt a mix of humiliation and pain telling him I couldn't move my legs, and he replied that of course I could, that I just wanted attention. Patricia appeared behind him and, to my shock, took his side, saying I was ruining her party and always had to be the center of attention. Some people looked uncomfortable, others just stayed quiet, while I lay there on the concrete, terrified and unable to move, begging someone to call an ambulance. Patricia let out a mocking laugh and said what a coincidence this was happening today of all days. Finally, one of Ison's cousins pulled out her phone and dialed emergency services. The minutes that followed felt endless. The tingling was gone, replaced by a total absence of feeling. No cold, no heat, no pressure, nothing. When the ambulance lights lit up the front of the house, 2 paramedics got out, a man and a woman. She knelt beside me with a calm, professional voice, introduced herself as Betrayal, and started asking me questions while I explained what I was feeling. Ison stood nearby with his arms crossed, saying not to waste her time because I was exaggerating, but she completely ignored him and continued her exam, touching my legs and asking if I could feel any pressure. I shook my head as she tested different points, then used a small instrument to check my reflexes. Her expression changed, turning serious, very serious, and she repeated the test once more before exchanging a look with her partner that I will never forget, one full of alarm. That was the moment real fear hit me because I understood this wasn't normal and that she had just noticed something no one else had seen. While Ison stayed convinced this was all an act, the paramedic grew more and more uneasy, with no idea that the next few minutes would change my life forever. She checked my legs a third time with a completely different expression, asking since when I hadn't been able to feel anything near my knee. I told her since the fall, and she nodded slowly before repeating the test, confirming there was no response at all. Her partner was preparing the stretcher while she kept watching me closely, and that's when Patricia sighed in annoyance, saying they could wrap this up now because the guests were waiting for the cake. The paramedic looked up and told her this was a medical emergency, and Patricia crossed her arms and replied that I always found a way to ruin family events. The professional didn't respond and kept working, but as she examined my legs again, she found several old bruises near my thighs and around one knee, asking how I had gotten those injuries. I had no answer because, honestly, I didn't know myself, since for months, I had suffered strange falls, bumps, and loss of balance that were always blamed on stress or my supposed exaggeration. She studied the marks carefully, then looked at Ison and asked him to explain them, and he quickly answered that I tripped a lot. That answer seemed to raise her suspicion even more, and then she asked me a question that froze me in place, asking if I felt safe at home. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Ison tensed up. Patricia's eyes went wide, and I could barely process what I had just heard. The paramedic repeated the question, and before I could answer, Ison cut in, saying this was ridiculous, but she ignored him again while her partner finished preparing the stretcher. She stood up, stepped a few feet away, and grabbed her radio, and although I couldn't hear everything, I did catch her requesting immediate police backup. The silence that followed was total. Patricia went pale and asked why on earth they needed police, while the paramedic came back to my side and explained carefully that it was a safety procedure, as if she preferred not to say more in front of everyone. A few minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived and the officers began questioning everyone there, while the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance. From inside, I could see one of the officers asking Ison pointed questions, and he looked increasingly nervous, losing that arrogant attitude for the first time and showing real worry instead. During the ride to the hospital, I underwent more evaluations, with no feeling returning to my legs, and fear kept building inside me as I thought about the word no one dared say out loud, paralysis. Once we arrived, I was immediately taken for emergency testing, MRIs, CT scans, neurological exams, and after hours of waiting, a neurologist appeared with a serious expression, sat down beside my bed and told me they had found the cause: severe spinal cord compression that had been worsening for months. I thought back to every symptom that had been dismissed, every time I was called dramatic or exaggerating, and the doctor added that if I had waited any longer to get treatment, the damage could have been permanent. Tears ran down my face because I finally knew I hadn't been crazy or faking anything. Hours later, I got an unexpected visit. My lawyer arrived visibly shaken and told me he was in shock. I asked what was going on, and he explained something that left me speechless. Because after the request for police backup, several witnesses had given statements about Ison and Patricia's behavior, saying that for months they had openly mocked my condition, and that there were messages and recordings where both of them claimed I was faking illnesses for attention. But worse than that, a relative showed messages where Ison admitted to hiding information about my symptoms to avoid medical costs and to avoid canceling family trips. My lawyer was shocked, and so was I, because that night I realized I hadn't just been fighting an illness. I had been surrounded by people who preferred to humiliate me rather than help me. The days that followed brought treatment, rehabilitation, and difficult decisions. I filed for divorce, cut off all contact with Patricia, and began a new chapter focused entirely on my recovery. Months later, thanks to intensive therapy, I was able to walk again. Though it wasn't easy, there were days of pain, days of tears, and days I wanted to give up. But I kept going because every step proved something I already knew. The truth always comes out eventually. Those who called me a liar were exposed. Those who mocked my suffering had to face the consequences of their own actions. And I got back something far more valuable than mobility. I got back my dignity. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and you want more stories of betrayal, justice, and second chances, subscribe and join us for the next story.